And hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome to our August webinar behind the consulate window, what HR needs to know about the consular process. Um, we are here with my friend and colleague Yvette, and we're going to be talking to you in just a moment. I'm setting a timer. I'm going to push it ahead just a little bit because we are starting a little bit late. When the timer concludes, we will get the webinar started. So if you're getting here, get yourself a glass of water, find a snack, get yourself comfortable. If you're just joining, we'll give everyone else an opportunity to join, and we'll be talking in just a moment. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. A couple of just um, uh, couple of notes before we get started. We are a law firm, but this webinar is not legal advice. If you have specific questions for yourself, to your company, please reach out to an attorney, especially a Meltzer Hellrung attorney, for assistance. This is meant to be general information. A little bit about Meltzer Hellrung, who we are. We are a business immigration firm combining innovative service, proprietary technology, and a great immigration team to ensure that your company has an efficient and effective immigration program and that employees who are foreign nationals feel taken care of. Um, we have been recognized in a variety of spaces, including the Illinois Chamber Spotlight in 2026. We were named a Inc. Power Partner in 2025. We're also received Tier 1 recognition in immigration law from the best law firms this year. In terms of how we measure our own success, we think about program management, and that means making a program for your company that is more than just getting applications approved. It's about how do we structure the program to be effective so that you are leveraging immigration to be a business value. We are efficient. We turn cases around in 10 days for transfers. We are client and foreign national focused. We had an NPS score of 91 in 2025, and we really care about responsiveness. And so we measure that in how long does it take to get an email. Our average time in 2025 was about 4.5 hours. We offer more than immigration to just getting visas approved. We offer global immigration. We have compliance. We have the ability to litigate, and we have consular processing, which we're talking about today. So, in terms of our presenters today, I'm Matt Meltzer. I'm one of the founders and partners at Meltzer Hellrung. We're approaching 12 years old to this year. And I work with a lot of our clients, but often focus on entrepreneurial and early stage startups. And I'm really excited to introduce Yvette, who I will let introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Yvette Bansal. I'm a former U.S. consular officer. I served in Mumbai and New Delhi for almost 5 years. A little bit unusual to serve almost 5 years in a single post. Generally, officers will move around a little bit, and I will talk about that later. While I was in India, I was the H&L lead, and I was a deputy fraud prevention manager. I did NIV, IV. I've also done ACS, so all of my time was in consular. And yeah, I'll give you an overview today. And I always have this, saying that try to make everything make sense for the consular officer. So that will be the theme a little bit of when we talk about getting your cases through. So
Great.
that is about me.
Wonderful. There was a comment asking about audio. Uh,
Is
can you
my
hear me all
audio
right?
too? I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear
Okay,
me all right?
I can hear you great. Uh,
Okay.
for everyone else who is here, the Q&A function is live. If you have questions, please put them in. We will try to answer as many as we can in real time where appropriate. If we can't answer your question and you are named in this webinar, we will reach out to you subsequently to try to answer your question if it's possible. Okay. You want to just take a moment to introduce your company?
Right. So after I served for 5 years, I decided that I wanted to start a company to help with visa interview preparation and consular processing because I saw a lot of gaps at post. I saw a lot of people fall victim to schemes, and there was a lot of need for consular processing assistance, and it was a black box. So I started this company in early 2023, and now we are a total of five former consular officers, and we've adjudicated over 300,000 visas, and we help clients all over the world. And we work with companies and law firms and individuals and organizations of any kind. So, I've had temples call me and say, "Hey, I need a priest to go to the US. Can you help us with that adjudication?" So if you, after hearing our presentation, think, okay, I definitely would love to partner with consular officers, we do have a process for that, and you can visit us on odedivisa.com. So thank you.
Great. So, lots to talk about today. We're going to talk about consular processing. So much of what we focus on at Meltzer Hellrung is about getting visas approved and maintaining status, but there is this whole other element of going to get a visa stamp at a consulate, and it often can feel so um, obtuse, can feel unclear what is happening, and our goal is to try to demystify it as much as possible. Before we get there, we're just going to talk about some recent big news that's occurred, just to get some coverage on some of the things that are happening. First, there was a major settlement between OpenAI and the Department of Justice regarding perm labor recruitment. Basically, OpenAI was doing some major no-nos in terms of how they were recruiting for their perm process, requiring people to apply in paper. This is, I believe, now the 11th settlement between the Department of Justice and a company for perm issues. The Department of Justice is definitely going after major companies. They don't seem to have any focus on smaller organizations. Um, the settlement here is $1.2 million and potentially $2 million in back pay. Uh, the the Department of Civil Rights within the Department of Justice has released some like general best practices. Uh, these are governmental advice. These are not regulatory requirements. So take it with a grain of salt and talk to your Meltzer Hellrung attorney about what is best for your company. There is always a balancing of what is governmental advice versus what is regulatory minimums. So a couple of things, making sure you're capturing all of your applicants and you know who they are, making sure that you have documented how you have interviewed people who are potentially qualifying. The government is encouraging companies to advertise in the same channels that they would for any other role. Again, that's not the regulatory minimum, but the the necessity of doing so, I think, really depends on the size of your perm program. If you're a company that has three or four perms a year, the likelihood that you're going to get a lot of scrutiny on this is, based on current experience, zero. If you are a company that files 500 perms a year, this is something that you should pay attention to a lot. Uh, One thing to be aware of is that the government has released a regulation saying that they can now require filing of immigration applications online. The USCIS does have an online application portal. 6% of overall employment-based petitions are submitted online. It's not because lawyers are tech averse. It's because the online portal is not particularly cooperative with other technologies. There's no API between the USCIS and anything. So it requires a lot of extra work both for attorneys and for clients potentially to file online. There is no timeline yet of when certain applications may be required to be filed online, but it is something that could happen with 60 days notice. So uh, I-129s, which are the basis of H-1Bs, Ls, TNs, I-140s, which occur after the perm process, could all be required to be filed online in due time. So it's just something that we are tracking closely, preparing ourselves for when that happens so that we are able to do it. The biggest news is probably all saw potential $100,000 fee on H-1B CAF filings. I guess that there's just sort of like uh, a love of proposing $100,000 fees roughly every September from this administration. This time they have proposed an actual regulation as opposed to just a policy they put in place. The regulation is as poorly founded as the last attempt was. They're trying to collect fees to apply to other agencies. The statutes undergirding the USCIS say that they're supposed to collect fees for their own operations. It doesn't say anything that they can collect fees for other governmental operations. So it seems uh, just designed to cause chaos. It will, in terms of timeline, you should expect that. So the proposed regulation went live on Tuesday. Comments will be accepted through September 24th. I expect that a final rule will come down probably close to the end of the year, beginning of the year. It will then promptly be litigated. We will be butting up against the USCI, against the H-1B registration period for outcomes on any litigation. It will be chaotic. My personal feeling is that companies should proceed as if this will not be in place. I think it's unlikely that this will stay, but every company should talk to their attorney about assessing risk and how they are assessing this. Okay, last, before we get to international travel, there's been a lot of discussion of domestic travel. There were arrests at airports in the US in July, uh, targeting people who had lapsed visa statuses but were lawfully present in the US. Never seen this before. It's unclear if this is continuing. It's unclear if it was a one-time issue in terms of like how ICE was patrolling the airports. But the best guidance is if you do not have a valid status, but you are lawfully present. Example, you have an H-1B extension pending, but your last H-1B is now expired. You have an H-1B that's expired, but you have a valid adjustment of status pending. Those are all situations we may have valid work authorizations and are lawfully present in the US, but a status has lapsed. Best advice is not to pursue domestic airplane travel with it at this time. Wait for having a valid status. To employers, it is further reason to ensure that you maintain a status, even if someone can maintain work authorization without a status. So it is something to be cognizant of because it will prevent your employees from traveling even for business purposes. All right. In terms of consular processing, a lot is happening. The biggest news is today we saw news about pauses on immigrant visas. Immigrant visas are for green cards, so it is not for H-1Bs, it's not for Ls, it's not for TNs, it's for permanent residents. This is so that the consulates can get more training on educating changes in public charge rules. We're also seeing a visa pilot on expedited appointments. $750 gets you an appointment within 10 days for B1s at certain Western Hemisphere consulates. The expectation is this may roll out further beyond the B1s, may roll out globally. Basically, the Department of State role relies on receipts for visa applications to fund consular operations, and lo and behold, there are fewer people applying for visas right now due to our administration, and so they need more money. And then lastly, uh, there are you are there are challenges in getting third country visa appointments. The formal policy is that there are no third country visa appointments,
Hmm.
meaning you are not getting a visa at a place that you are not either living in or a citizen of. But we have seen people get those appointments, so it's just something you have to be look at carefully. And we have a travel guidance page that is linked here. The deck will go out to everyone. We encourage people to review that guidance page for scheduling appointments and traveling. Similarly, we have collateral as opposed to sharing it here and going over the mechanics of getting a visa appointment. That link is live, and if you are seeking a visa appointment, we have collateral on how to schedule. So, without further ado, let's get to the heart of this conversation and talk about what is like behind the consular window. That before, I think for most people, they don't have any clue who the people are behind the window. So, I would love for you just to tell us who is it? Like when you go to a consular appointment, who are you talking to?
Yeah. Is it okay? I want people to also write in the chat like where you are coming from, whether you are an applicant, what you're curious about, or you are an HR representative. That'll help me tailor a little bit as I go along. So we are going to start from the very beginning. How do foreign service officers become foreign service officers? It's a highly competitive program. You have to take a computerized test, the foreign service officer tests, and it's after the foreign service officer test, there is a panel that reviews your your entire application, and then you have an oral assessment. And after you get selected, you go into congen. Hold on one second. Um, I want to say regarding this particular process, there are also there's also other pathways. If you have a child and you're of a diverse background, there is a couple of fellowships called one is called Wrangle and one is called Pickering, and then there's various other fellowships that actually feed into the foreign service as well that not many people know about. So if it is something that maybe is of interest, you can do a little bit more research about it. But for generally everyone, again, it's a highly competitive process, and that oral assessment that officers go to, the candidates go to, it's pretty nerve-wracking. It's an all-day assessment. You do a memo, you have an exam, you read policy, you do a memo, and you have to present in front of various people that are sitting in a room. So you have about five, six candidates at the same time. You have a project, and your task is to kind of negotiate where the funds of this project go. And I did a lot better at that than explaining this right now. But it's pretty intense project process, and I that goes to show the caliber of those adjudicating on the visa window is fairly high. I mean, these are smart folks. They're detail oriented. And after you do get selected, you go through congen training, which is around 6 weeks, and it's a trial by fire. It's pretty intensive. You study the foreign affairs manual all day, and then you have to take graded exams. And we also have kind of mock interview places like the window, and people coming up to the window. Generally, officers don't have any concept of what consular affairs is. There's five different cones. People select their cones prior to the examinations, and they have to all attain a top secret clearance. Okay. So once you go through all that, go ahead, Matthew.
Oh
Sorry, that
yeah,
was
the,
a
the, the most
that
important
was
thing is
messy.
everyone who you're going to, everyone who's doing an interview, there's no There's no staff from like the local country. Everyone who's there is a foreign affairs officer who's doing a consular interview.
Everybody who is doing the actual interview is they've had to clear this process, get a top secret clearance, is the only one qualified to make the call at the window, and not even your boss or supervisor can, tap you on the shoulder and say, overturn this. Obviously, there's indirect ways to um, advocate for different outcomes at the visa window, but the sole adjudication authority is with that consular officer, and that's what they're meant to do. And when you see local staff at the window, they are translators. And so the way that that works, and I'll touch on that, is generally language appointments and English appointments are divided at posts. In India, you have those language appointments the first hour, hour and a half of the day, where we have local staff next to us, and those are designated language appointments. The first two tours are, generally consular, regardless of your cone. So, and the way that it works is, okay, like for example, me, I speak Arabic. I really wanted to go to Dubai, but that wasn't in the cards for me. They're not, just they say that if you tell them what you want, they're going to do the opposite, especially in the beginning, but sometimes forever. So maybe I was a little bit too eager, but I did get stationed in New Delhi. I didn't know much about India, and I arrived in New Delhi in May, pretty hot time. And I got to watch somebody at the visa window adjudicate very quickly 120 visas a day. And I was expected to shadow for a week, ask my questions, learn from them. And then the following weeks, I was put on the window, told, here is the system that you briefly learned for a week in Congen. Make sure you have your foreign affairs manual up, and here's your first applicant. Pretty nerve wracking. And then I was expected to learn a lot and get up to speed very quickly. When I was at the visa window, you had your foreign affairs manual up. You also followed cable guidance, department policy, um, management procedures, and there's a lot of different things uh, that go into you making that decision. But generally, the way that officers work is that from that shadowing experience, you start to benchmark and kind of norm, and then apply those learnings into adjudicating that population, and you slowly learn. And why that's important is because you don't really know the level of that consular officer. If they had just arrived to post, they may adjudicate slightly differently or not notice things that a more seasoned adjudicator within that country notices, which could then impact the outcome of that consular processing.
Got it. Um, so that's clear about what you're looking at as background. What do you, let's talk about what you're actually seeing when someone steps before the window, like what's before you on your computer.
Yeah, so the first thing that every officer generally opens is that DS-160. They'll scan it. They also will look through the passport to see passport stamps, prior visas. We see almost immediately previous applications and refusals. If you've answered anything on that DS-160, uh, controversially or not, the norm, like, you said yes to a criminal record, that is immediately highlighted for the officer. And we have your past consular notes. If you've been there before, we can open those up. For petition information, it's a different system, but there is a way to see the history of the H-1B petitioner if they've had anything adverse. Generally, if the consular officer wants to deep dive into it, that's when you see more of the 221Gs. If it's an emergency appointment, we just get a note saying emergency appointment. That doesn't hurt or help you in any way. We just know it is. And if there's a congressional note, we have no idea what that congressperson has says. It'll just say congressional note submitted, so we know like somebody cares. Could be slightly helpful, but not, fully. So that's what you see on screen.
When you're looking at DS-160, because I think so many people scrutinize this and think about it, like what are you actually looking like? Where are the you mentioned like criminal record, past refusals. How much do the other things matter.
Right. So those are big things that you just flagged, like criminal records,
Yeah,
prior refusals. Those are huge and obviously will be scrutinized. But when you look at the DS-160, you're looking for everything. You're looking at age, you're looking where are they staying in the United States, what are their job duties. You start to learn the DS-160 like the back of your hand. And just depending on what that visa class is, you notice things more. Like, for example, for an H-1B, I don't necessarily care what countries they travel to. For a B1, B2, I will look at what countries they travel to try to establish their finances. I see they've been to Switzerland and other European countries. Now I'm getting a sense of that individual. So yes, different visa classes, I'll be noticing different
got it.
things.
And then that's what you're seeing on the screen. Then you're seeing the person in front of you. Like, from my experience, I, we do preparation for consular interviews, especially for things where there's an adjudication, like an H1B1 or an E3 or an L blanket. Um, you know, there's so much you do to prepare the written documents, but so much goes into presenting
Hmm.
yourself at the consulate.
Hmm.
And I've had times where I've spoken to an individual and rushed to HR and say, we have a problem. This person you know, is not going to be able to present themselves well. How do we work on
Hmm.
this? But what are you listening to? Like, what makes someone compelling? Where are the issues that you say, what are the sort of like red flags that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think this slide really kind of captures it. So different visa classes, um, I'm listening for different things or I want to assess different things, obviously. But this is a pretty good general list. Obviously, how clear are they at explaining what either their trip is or their role? Do they understand the details? Um, Credibility in what they're speaking, but also credibility can come from the employer. So if somebody's coming to me with an H-1B from Amazon, I am going to be way more understanding if their answers are not perfect. But if you're coming to me from a small company, and we'll talk about that later, then you haven't really established your credibility. Credibility could come from where you live. If I recognize even that neighborhood, and I know it takes somebody very wealthy for that B1, B2 traveler, that could matter. For an H1B or an L, that doesn't matter as much. Do you understand? Do you understand why you're traveling and why it's important and why you can't do it over the internet, um, especially for the H-1Bs, knowledge of their employer. It's a red flag for me, or I guess not a red flag, but I will flag that this person hasn't worked for that employer before. So an H-1B that's brand new, knowledge of the employer and like worksite and client is extremely important. For the B1 business traveler, the the agenda, the timeline is important. I'm looking at obviously accuracy, even in paperwork. A lot of times things will get sent to fraud. So as a deputy fraud prevention manager, um, I'll get officers, or I have sent people to fraud if the signature looks off, if there's typos. So for your B1 business travelers, for example, if you're the inviting company and you're based in the United States, the officer is going to expect nomenclature on that letter that sound American, right? So different countries have different ways of writing things. We even look and scrutinize that letter to say, okay, yeah, an American wouldn't write that. You have Sam Smith signing it, but it sounds like an Indian wrote it. So that type of thing gets flagged. Um, lots of different variables are moving around on during those 2 to 3 minutes.
Got it. Um, in terms of one, Jamie has a question. How long does an appointment take?
It's anywhere between 1 minute to maximum 5 minutes. If things are going beyond 5 minutes, you're probably going to either get a refusal or a 221G.
And within that 1 to 5 minutes, how many questions do you expect to ask someone?
At least on average 6 questions for a normal interview. If we know it's an automatic no, we see somebody coming up for B1 business travel, their salary is really low in their home country, their first answer is not good. If it's a solid no, because there is pressure to get 120 visa interviews. I can even see how many I've done in comparison to my peers. We have a report, it's up. I can see that Susie next door has done 60 and I'm on 50. So when I think that person is going to be a no, it's going to be a quick no. If I think they're a solid yes, I see that Amazon H-1B petitioner, I don't care. I'm going to say yes, and I'm not going to cross my T's. I know it's a yes. It's a solid yes. It's everyone else that's going to get maybe a solid 6 questions, and the officer is making up their mind.
Got it. Um, let's go over, you've put together some really good hypos here about, some examples of what a case might be. You want to go over
Mhm.
this first one about your H-1B software engineer?
Yes, I just had a client like this actually. Smaller company, unknown. He, 15 to 20 employees. He wasn't sure. He didn't have it. So we'll talk about this. So end client placement in this particular situation makes the case more complex. Hired from abroad, meaning not following the traditional F1 OPT, and then I get a job in the United States, which is generally in the safer bucket. So there's, flags and safer bucket. This person is kind of presenting a lot of flags that they need to resolve. This person's never traveled to the United States. They've never worked for this employer. So immediately I'm like, how did you get this job? Somebody willing to petition for you all the way from India. I want to know every detail. Somebody with this profile, it's unlikely they're not going to get a 221G because if I'm doing my due diligence, I have some research to do.
Got it. Um, just out of curiosity, when you talk about like big companies that I mean, there's like consumer facing companies like Amazon, Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of big companies. There's if I looked at like the Fortune 100, there
Yeah.
are companies on there that I don't know what they do. I
Uh-huh.
couldn't tell you their names.
Sure. Yeah.
How can applicants help tell you that their company is significant?
Right. So web presence, like I'm immediately going to Google that company. I want to know what it looks like, where they're going to be working at. And here is where you're going to be able to explain your employer. So immediately I'm going to narrow my questions down for this person to determine, is this a Fortune 100 company or not? And so how many employees does your employer have? Like, where are you based? Immediately when they tell me 15 to 20 versus, oh, there's 250 in this particular office and 2,000 worldwide. So that um, gives them that credibility, even though I haven't heard Amazon.
Got it.
Okay.
I think we finished the first story. So let's go to the second one. This is about your hypo about a B1.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, so a lot of people will say they want to go to the US to understand client requirements. Almost nobody comes to me with an agenda, and the answers and the support letters don't match. So, generally for a B1 on business travel, there is a sending company and there's a receiving company. So, the sending company will send a letter, and the receiving company will send an invitation letter, but they need to match. They need to say, oh, this person does this job and this is what they're going to be doing. And oftentimes that's not the case. The inviting company will say something different. So, a successful B1 application, you have to be able to explain what you're going to be doing what you do in your job in your home country and what you're going to be doing in the United States, right? And we are trying to determine if this B1 business travel falls into the appropriate letter of the law. They need to be able to explain that it's a training, a contract negotiation, stakeholder meetings. If what you do back in your home country is the same exact as what you're going to do in the US. It's productive work. There's no difference, and you're not allowed to do productive work on a B1 visa. So what do we do to try to determine we know that this is not productive work? We want to know the length of time. So if somebody is telling me they're understanding client requirements for 3 months or 2 months, no, you're not understanding client requirements for too long. You're like going to do hands-on work. If their pay is low, we start to think, is this really a person that's going to be sent to high-level meetings? That doesn't really quite work. Also, we have an additional challenge with these Bs. We have to ensure first that they overcome 214B, meaning, is this job and their overall profile supported for a tourist visa in general? Do they have something to lose in their home country? So that's
And for
first and
those who don't, and
foremost.
for those who don't know, what is 214B?
So that's the code that we enter to essentially say this person doesn't overcome immigrant intent. So generally people think about it in terms of they don't have enough ties. So ties meaning they have a family back home or something monetarily that they would lose if they would abandon their tourist visa class and kind of live in the United States illegally.
Does it change anything? This hypo is about going to visit a client company. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have many clients who have global offices and they want people to come in for a week long training at their US office, something like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, is there any difference in terms of like what you're looking for in that kind of circumstance?
Well, it's positive that they're only going for a week and that they're going for training because at least that's defined. A lot of business travelers, they don't have such a defined 1 week for training, and that's when it becomes problematic. So make sure that you give them something that is clearly defined that is either them taking a training or them giving a training to others, or if their meetings that their meetings make sense with their role. Also, if there's somebody really important that you think that you really want in the United States, have them do similar trips to Europe or China or another country so that the officer can easily establish a pattern of good travel. Don't get your youngest guy with the lowest pay and expect him that he's going to be able to go and overcome this immigrant intent
Got it.
notion. That's going to be harder, right? Mm-hmm.
Uh, so what are these two gates? You have a gate one, overcome the 214B. Gate two, provide the business activity is legitimate.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying earlier. First and foremost, that person has to overcome immigrant intent by just their profile. Younger is more going to be more scrutinized, etc. Gate two, then after you're able to get into gate one, like the officer is like, okay, this person overcomes general 214B, then they have to prove that what they're doing on that business visa is legitimate. Um, it's a two-pronged system in the mind of the consular officer. So I've explained kind of all of this already, and I'll just kind of make the point: a good agenda is important, a good and clear agenda for things like trainings or stakeholder meetings, where they will be held, how long they're going to be, who that person is meeting with. Give them a crisp 2 to 3 pages. So let's just review. You want the letter from India and the US to be brief 1 pagers and match the intent, job description, and everything for that employee, and giving them a clear agenda and be realistic about how long that individual is to stay in the United States, and they need some sort of prep to make sure that they can answer basic questions about their employing company and the visiting company, and make sure to have them be able to explain that this who is funding this travel. They obviously cannot get paid from the US side of things. So all of those things come into play for that B1.
I have a question just in terms of like logistics here. There have been times where getting a B visa appointment was a year out. Uh, and so I was advising my clients, be like, hey, if you know
Hmm.
someone you want to bring them here for a training, like you need to put this in motion in a year out, and you don't know exactly
Hmm.
like it's hard. You're not going to
Hmm.
plan everything exactly a year in advance. And clearly, the person
Right.
can show up to an interview a year later after scheduling the appointment. Um, but how can someone who like a company knows that they would like to be able to bring them to the US for things, but because they started the process a year out and because of scheduling availability, document what it is the person is going to be coming for to your
Yeah.
satisfaction?
Um, well, the officer doesn't really care about any of it, right? They just want to hear why you're going to the United States. So you have to work around that constraint. And essentially, if they're coming in from internationally, in either plan ahead if it's like a fixed training for everybody, or create that agenda. Everything should be dated in recent terms. So they get
Sure.
the visa appointment. If it's a year in advance, now you start to plan so that everything lines up on their visa date to reflect current time. It doesn't make sense for a conference to be held in September and then they're like, oh, I was going to go to that conference in September, but I had to miss it because of this visa appointment. Now I'm just coming to get this visa for next conference next year. That's not going to fly. So you're just going to have to work with the constraint and be tactical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about you have this sort of example of the same trip, two travelers. One with, has the person who's issued and the one who's not. Anything further you want to sort of like give an understanding of that?
Yeah. So this is just kind of encapsulating everything that I've uh, already explained why Traveler A would be approved and Traveler B would not be approved. The interesting thing about them is they could have the same exact profile. It's just that Traveler A understood the name of the game and played by the rules. And, um, their HR team did a really good job of working with those constraints, making sure that their interview date and what they're going to do in the US, that timeline worked out and that all the documentation reflected that versus, maybe that's why Traveler B just needs to understand client requirements because this was planned so long ago and they're going to figure it out once that individual gets the visa, but that's not how it's going to work.
Yeah. Let's talk about 221 Gs. I think the bane of my client's existence,
Hmm.
the black box. Well, just a 221G for those who don't know, is a refusal, but it does not necessarily mean it's the end of the journey.
Hmm.
It is an opportunity. Often certain things are being requested, um, but it is the most frustrating area from like the user experience because you don't really know what the timeline is going to look like. People want to know. I've submitted things. It's been a couple months since I've done it. So what happens when a 220? Can you just sort of walk us through what happens when a 221G is issued?
Do you have any, I can, but do you have any specific questions on this that maybe I can answer? Maybe that would be more helpful.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I think the biggest thing for most people is um what is the how do you get expectations on timeline? And what, there's one person who is in the chat today had, said it sounds like they had an appointment pass, it was 90 days ago. Um, you know, how do you get how do you try to probe like the timelines once a 221G occurs?
Right. So, working with, it really depends. You have to use context clues from, your lawyer partnering with a consular processing ex visa officer. We're going to have to work together with you to get context clues as to what happened during that interview. Okay, so say you're at that interview and everything went smoothly. It's a known company, everything went great, but you were 221G'd and no documents were requested. So that tells me that maybe there's a security hit, right? Your name needs to go back to Washington, D.C. for a security advisory opinion because it may have flagged as similar to somebody with a similar name that has done bad things. That's generally why somebody would go for a security advisory opinion or some other reason. So no documents. That can take months, right? Versus you are from a small company, you kind of know you didn't explain yourself very well, and now the officer is requesting a list of the company and their employees, company tax documents. This tells me that they're going to look into your employment. If you have an end client on the back end, our local staff is going to call the end client. And if the end client confirms that, yes, you're going there, or they call the company and the company confirms your job, your details, everything, and that information goes back to the consular officer, that could be enough for the consular officer. However, if it's not enough for the consular officer, or it's not an end client issue, but a legitimacy issue on that particular company, then that case could be sent to FDNS for a site visit. So if that company has never been sent to FDNS and we have a way to check that, the consular officer may want to get a check on it. Either they have Googled the company and they see something adverse, like, okay, this person is telling me he's a mechanical engineer to work on X, Y, and Z, but this building does not look like it's going to support a product-based job as he's explaining. It could be something like that. FDNS was notoriously backed up during COVID. That can take months. 221G in different circumstances could take longer or shorter amounts of time, depending on what the officer decides the next step of the case is. Do you have any specific questions
I
regarding
think I think my
that?
best question, based on it sounds like, the best things to know are ascertaining like what happened at the interview. So if you were getting someone gets a 221G, what's your recommendation in terms of what they should do to like record their interactions? Like, should someone try to like after they leave the consulate and they had that, like write down to the best of memory like what were the questions and answers?
I would definitely submit that information as quickly as if you wanted to go quicker, put together that information, inform your company, you
Yeah,
know, contact a lawyer, contact a consular processing expert too. I mean, you
yeah,
want to cover your, this is an H-1B, this is your job, right? You want to make sure that you understand why this has happened. You could even ask your lawyer, I mean your HR representative, has there ever been FDNS site visits before? We know how many revocations have happened for that particular client. So if your company has had a lot of revocations in the past, it could be you were prepared well, but your company has had some adverse history that you're paying for because they didn't play by the rules last time, right? So there could be a lot going on. So I would recommend you reach out to your company, a lawyer, submit the information um, with the help of those individuals, and
yeah.
make sure that everything you're submitting is clear, and don't oversubmit. If they just ask you for the tax documents for that company, you don't need to throw out every single piece of information because the officer has a lot of cases to go through. They don't necessarily remember you. They're going to look back on those notes. And if you give them a stack of hundreds of documents, they're going to feel compelled to look at those documents, and they don't have time for that. So you could be sitting in 221G for a long time. Using context clues as to what happened during that 221G can get you to tailor even the way that you format your 221G, or what your lawyer can write on your behalf. People that do consular processing like us, we work with lawyers to help you get unstuck, or we advise you. We cannot write directly to the consulate for you, but if it's a case that needs additional help, even the formatting and the communication can impact how long you're stuck in 221G. I would say follow up, submit them, follow up after a week, and then follow up after every 2 weeks. I would say if it's becoming something that is taking longer than a month and a half to 2 months, It could be due to the fact that it's an FDNS. Um, you have gone to name check, or um, that adjudicating officer is sitting on that case because they have found something adverse, but is they're not able to clear it, so they're kind of sitting on that case, and that is kind of the least likely scenario. But after following up every 2 weeks, you'll start to understand, like, hey, can I get this case unstuck on my own? But the people who respond to you are local staff members, and if you're stuck in security, they're not going to tell you, hey, you're stuck in security. There's
Right.
no harm in following up. It's not going to adversely affect you, just a quick email. But yeah, you definitely want to get some professionals involved here.
Um, Regarding security, I know that all the social media stuff has occurred
Hmm.
subsequent to your time as a
Hmm.
consular officer.
Yeah.
Does that fall into the, based on your understanding, does that fall into the security review, or is there things that people can do if they are being flagged
So
for social
for
media?
yeah, social media, like the security, like an SAO has to go to Washington, D.C., and they have to clear it, where a social media review falls squarely on the consular officer. So I've talked to
Okay.
a lot of consular officers, and we have like a collaborative group. So it is something that the consular officer has to check themselves. They have limited AI tools. Like, for example, if you have nothing on your social media, the AI tool can flag that. Okay, they have 4 accounts and there's nothing. I have seen people get refused for that, but they subsequently went back and actually told the officers their case and have gotten approved. But for social media shouldn't take that long. Some officers will do it quickly at the window, and some officers may G and do their cases all at once. It's up to the discretion of the officer and how they operate at post, but that should not be a long 221G at all. And certainly when you follow up, that should be something that you can get unstuck.
Okay. Great. Um, let's just talk about how the staffing of a consulate works. I would love to just you're sitting at the window. What does the org chart look like, and how does that org chart impact how you know
Yeah,
interviews work?
you are just you do have discretion as to how you adjudicate cases, of course, but the norms change based on the inputs from Washington, D.C., could be through a cable, through their relationship with that country, what visas they want moved, and how much pressure they input on the ambassador to move specific types of visas. So once that ambassador gets the unofficial or official, like, politics and lay of the land, that goes to, consular leadership. So the minister consular of consular affairs heads India. Under him is an IV chief and an IV chief, and sometimes he has a deputy. That's a big post, so he has a deputy. So the chain of command, it trickles down, and it really also depends on personal beliefs of that individual as well, if you can believe it or not, how things end up playing. So if you have somebody who is, conservative policy, but the NIV chief themselves, who control the officers on the line, lean slightly liberal, even though that conservative policy gets that NIV chief can still say, hey, we want to be adjudicating fairly. Or that NIV chief says, if you have any doubts, you need to refuse. So while they can't tell us about individual cases, that's how sometimes things ebb and flow. This means that a consulate that's viewed as highly as viewed as really scrutinizing one year could be liberal the next year. It really depends on this chain of command and how it shakes out.
Got it. That's helpful. And that also why recent experience is probably more helpful if you're talking to people than someone who went to a consulate 2 years ago to learn what it was like.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely need to keep up.
um, in terms of some quick hits, you were mentioning a couple of things, you know, uh, dependents mainly need to prove a credible relationship. So I don't think, in my experience, children never have a problem. Spouses, I think, in my experience, the only people who ever run into trouble are if the marriage was exceptionally recent. So if you're,
Yeah.
you got married the day before your interview, being prepared to talk about like how long the relationship has occurred and that it's not necessarily something that just occurred recently. Um, what about O1s? Sometimes those get flagged, especially, yeah, I know you weren't in London, but that's a particularly challenging place.
Mhm.
What happens with O1s?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of O refusals in London and Paris and Singapore and India. I mean, all over. If you see how many issuances of O1s or applications from O1s prior to 2018 and today, you can see that a lot more people are getting savvy. A lot more lawyers are getting savvy on how to petition for O1s. So the number of O1s has increased drastically, and so has the number of refusals. So with H1Bs and Ls, you need to be able to revoke those petitions based on something concrete that you find. That's why they're asking for tax documents. But for an O1, the best practice is to revoke the petition, but you don't have to. You can apply 214B, and we have seen that. I don't agree with that practice. You should certainly try to revoke the petition if you find something, not just because you don't necessarily think they're extraordinary, but that's the leeway the officers do have and do use. They're not convinced of either the extraordinary ability nature of the story or the petitioner themselves. So if the petitioner is an agency rather than a company, especially if you're self-petitioning too, the credibility of the petitioner now comes under fire, as well as your own extraordinary ability. It's a very vulnerable visa class. Getting it is an extremely high payoff. So we prep actually a lot of O's, and we've helped a lot of O's overcome previous denials, and it's really rough for O's out there right now. Is my perspective.
Well, we are closing on the end of the hour, and so some closing thoughts on uh, how people can best be prepared to hit the ground running and successful at their interview.
Yeah, so officers are going to ask you probing questions. It may not sound like a big question, but you need to be able to. This is the biggest tip: take initiative and make your case, and do it within the first one or two questions. Um, and everything else I've really explained. But if I could just say something, it would be that second question. Don't just let the officer drive. You as the applicant need to drive and be prepared, because you have a lot more control over that visa outcome than you know. So that is my closing statement, Matthew. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me. I really
This was
appreciate you
great. Thank
having
you
me.
so much. This is really insightful and revealing for me as well. Um, for everyone who's here, thank you for attending. If you are so inclined, we always love a good review. If you found this informative and helpful, we love your feedback. Um, you know, at Meltzer Hellrung, we specialize in immigration, but Udeti and Yvette here are really experts on navigating the consulate, and so we are always excited to partner together because we understand the legal issues, we understand the case already, but having that insight of like what's actually happening inside the consular office, how things operate, is a super helpful um, skill and insight that they bring to this process. And so partnerships are really useful when there are challenging cases. So thank you for letting us both talk to you today.
Thank you so much.
And so if you uh, at the very beginning, if you didn't have it, we will send it out also, but making sure that we have uh, both out. Most people know us, but if you're looking for Vet, UdetiVisa.com is where to find her.
Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.